Tony Brown has been writing for well over 50 years and publishing and performing his work for over 40. A 7-time Pushcart Prize and 2-time Best of the Net nominee, he has traveled the country, slammed for the Worcester Poets Asylum, and organized and hosted many readings and reading series. He is the winner of the 2022 Stanley Kunitz Medal, endowed by the late U.S. Poet Laureate and Worcester native, and awarded annually to a poet for lifetime achievement and service to the Central Massachusetts poetry community.
Thank you. It makes me feel so accomplished, doesn't it? I was talking with Joe Fusco, another local poet. We're doing there's an open mic in a celebration of National Baseball Poetry Month at the end of April, and we're actually reading near Polar Park and Worcester and stuff. And Joe told me that if I'm going to read, I have to wear the medal. The medal is heavy. I have no desire to wear the medal ever under any circumstance. I don't think it's been out of the box since I got it, as a matter of fact. But Joe has ordained it, so there it is. So hi, welcome. I'm Tony, and I'm looking forward to reading for you all. I have a short selection of poems drawn from throughout my poetic career, and I look forward to possible discussion with all of you about it. So, with that said, there's at least one other poet in the room that I'm aware of. So this is addressed specifically to Sarah. It starts titled, 10 Poems You Could Be Writing Instead of Listening to Me. The one where you are in a dark room, speaking to one person you've never met. 2. The one recited from behind a white screen. You're backlit in Yankee Stadium on a small stage. There's no microphone, no public address system. The stadium is empty. 3. The one like the previous one, except you have the greatest sound system in world history. The stadium is still empty. 4. The one where you ask the audience to harm you. 5. The one where you speak through a gag made from a sleeve cut from a fresh corpse. 6. The one in which you speak English but are trying to imitate the sound of another tongue. The one your grandmother spoke. Not a translation. English words that sound like the words she used. Can you hear her? 7. The one in which you are completely fictional. You were never born, all the memory you've got is false, and your audience will be surprised to discover you're not a beloved character from their favorite childhood book. 8. The one in which the pen suddenly leaps out of your hand and stakes a territorial claim like a bear. 9. The one in which the detective is not eaten for hours under the single white bulb. There's sweat. You're about to confess, and it dawns upon you that lying or telling the truth do not matter as long as you can't smell your body emptying itself into this ill-fit suit, this outfit made for a coffin outing. You can't tell where you are, but it's a city you should have been born in. Your grandmother's coming to throw your bail. Can you hear her? She's looking for you. Calling you, asking for you by a name you never heard before, but it's yours. 10. The one where you are finally in a full stadium. There are lions. So I thought I would do a couple about the pattern here is sort of almost autobiographical, and I'll fill you in on the pieces. I grew up in Uxbridge, not terribly far from here. This is called Salvage. On the outskirts of town, in an open space where someone's gathered the bones of houses, pipes, and such, Johnson's scrapyard, or Pulaski's salvage, some place like that, with some name like that. Rows of refrigerators with their doors off like burial vaults skewed crazy on end, their doors in a separate pile. The kind of place where it looks like a bomb went off. Just the normal tear it up and cart it somewhere where we don't have to see it every day kind of place. Full of old corrugated iron and the odd bike sticking up out of the rusty creek that's always on the border. Maybe a fence with barbed wire, some frontier you recognize somehow. The kind of place you loved as a kid. Now you tell your own kids to stay away. That kind of obsolete place where a car you couldn't put back on the road legally is used to move stuff. A Buick with its back torn open like a pickup truck. Seats used by the little shack where the attendant sits and waits for something. Wears greasy dickies with a name tag. Smokes Mustang cigarettes. You know the kind of place I mean? No matter how far out of town you put it, no matter how hard you try to forget it's there, that kind of place you were told to avoid because it's dangerous, because someone could get hurt, well, that's home too. Don't pretend you don't know or that it's not true. Ask your kids sometimes where they ride their bikes when they're gone for a long time. They'll probably lie, like you did once, but you'll know. My place was on Hazel Street in Uxbridge, right off of downtown. You had to go way up a hill. And there was a junkyard up there where we all used to go hang out. And when I got a little older, we would borrow our parents' 22s, our dad's 22s. My mom didn't have a 22. But we would try to shoot rats at night. The joys of small town life. Why I left home. Every day I change my route, but the wind shifts behind me, bringing the same smoke to me from a different source. I lift my foot. I take each step, and the ground ignites around the trace I leave behind. And it seems that everywhere I've been and everywhere I could go from here, there's a fire. I think for many of us, there's a time when we realize that whatever home was no longer is home. And that's sort of a piece about that. It's an important piece to me. It's the very first, well, it's the second piece really, that I ever won an award with. And this was first place in the Worcester County Poetry Association contest back in '94. And its other claim to fame is, as a past winner, I can never enter that contest again. And people are constantly asking me, how come you don't enter that contest? And I'm like, been there, done that. Makes me sad. So I moved on in life, college, et cetera, et cetera. And I spent an awful lot of my time in corporate America. In many ways, I still am in corporate America. I work, when I'm not doing poetry or music, as a training consultant. I develop training programs and learning and development programs for large companies, nonprofits, government agencies. I do an awful lot of work with the Department of Children and Families, such as it is. And I do an awful lot of that kind of work. So for years, though, I did it at TJX, the company that runs TJ Maxx and Marshalls. I spent 20 years there. And still, it's strange, I got a request today to come in and talk about doing some more work for them after several years of not doing it. I'm like, So it's funny, they were my major client for the first 10 years after I left them. There were people at the end who were still like, I haven't seen you lately. It's because I don't work here anymore. And then felt that way. And I worked an awful lot in finance. The finance division, running training programs for finance. This is called The Song of the Twirling Accountants. She stands before all her peers and explains that the people in her department, financial accounting, handle stress by twirling twice in the doorway of the cubicle before delivering bad news among themselves. You can't help but laugh when you see it, she says, shyly. And the room breaks up, but not unkindly. And in the laughter, I can hear a door opening. I feel the warmth and see the light as it leaks in from the daffiness that's blazing from somewhere outside this room. He manages his stress by running. He runs 10 miles daily, morning and night, runs more miles during the week than on weekends, runs whenever he can get time away from the office, runs, can't get enough time on the road, he says. There are pictures of his family on his desk, the only personal items in his office. Shrugs it off, says, keeps me going when I comment on the beauty of his daughter's eyes. But I can almost see what he must see. A flat road through green fields, a blue house shining ahead, his children running out to meet him. And I discover over time a vice president who is actively involved with Amnesty International, a director who works at a battered women's shelter, a cello-playing auditor. There's a rumor that there's a slam poet in the training department. The god of death metal guitar rules the mailroom, and a credit manager who hangs her own paintings made of multicolored dryer lint in her office just to see the faces of the senior staff when they realize what it is that they're admiring. A trick of the light makes the pattern of shadow on my desk resemble a steeple without a church. And I shut the computer down, and I close my eyes, and the voices of the workers around me ring with hymns. If your God is in the details of Scripture, or inhabits the vaults of the sky, mine is entirely revealed within these people, and this work that pays for all our prayers. Who among us has the right to say what is and is not holy work? Thank you. An awful lot of poets will get, or used to get on me about, how can you work in corporate America? And I never had anybody in corporate America say to me, how do you waste your time being a poet? Because they all had something they would rather be doing. And they knew. They knew. I had at least one person quit after I quit to pursue painting. She went back. So one day I quit. There's a lot of reasons why I quit, but mostly I was coming to the end of a marriage. Life felt like I had reached a precipice, and I needed to honor, for want of a better term, my calling. Sorry about that. And I stroked the microphone. I'm sure that'll come out great. And that's hard. That's hard. And I realized that if I stayed there much longer, something was going to break within me. This is called The Radioactive Artist. True story, by the way. The radio today brings me the story of an artist who builds sculptures from nuclear waste. I sit back amazed, and I listen to a doomed voice in full cry on behalf of his art. He has his nuclear materials handler's license number tattooed on the back of his neck. He has the stuff of his every sculpture in his blood, and he builds his work from the scraps and tools left behind in the wake of nuclear weapons manufacturing, and keeps them in a gallery on the Hanford Military Reservation in Washington State, a gallery that will be off limits to critics for 10,000 years. Someone has to do this, he says. Someone has to make these things beautiful. And he says this as the energy of the earth rises from below his feet, and the energy of the sun closes around him like a sphere, and he stands at the center of our modern storm. And he will die. sooner rather than later, having made art that no one will ever see, and considering it a privilege to have done so. And his art, the sculptures I will never see, they made me quit my day job. They made me want to fly low over volcanoes, to feel that heat and bring it back with me on a legal pad, and it makes me weep to think that I've wasted so much time, to think that we've all wasted so much time. That's Radioactive Artist. Background. I walked in on the end of the radio story and was blown away listening to that radio story. And I never got the artist's name until many years later, when I found out his name was James Accord, A-C-C-O-R-D. And I found it out because NPR reran the radio story because he had committed suicide. For whatever it's worth. Secondary coincidence with this, talking about flying low over volcanoes. This is an older poem of mine. And I was reminded of it when a great poet named Craig Arnold went missing in, I want to say, Japan. And he was eventually found, he had gone hiking, and he fell into a volcano. They could not retrieve his body. So this one has an awful lot of weird resonances for me in terms of that. It should not be a surprise, well, actually, since, you know, some of you have no idea who I am, that some of my work has a very political side to it. I'm going to read a couple related to politics tonight, but not a lot. And they're really only peripherally related in the sense that they explain why I do what I do. This is called What Did You Do in the War? I wrote poems. A lot of poems. At the time, it seemed to many to be an indulgence. But now, it seems I wasn't writing poems as much as I was making bullets and planting seeds. Bullets for the moment, seeds for the future. Sometimes one poem would be both. Those were the times I think I was at my best. I do not like war. I am not one of those whose blood sings with it, but there were times, I admit, when I'd look at what I'd written and say, there's one that'll hurt. There's one that'll sprout later. And I'd sit back and say, there it is. I mean, why do you fight a war except for the chance to hear poems when it's over? Which is why they killed some of us, you know. It wasn't safe, not as dangerous as some things, but still they killed some of us, not only because our bullets hurt them, but because our seeds terrified them. So when you ask me what I did in the war, I tell you this, it wasn't as much as some did, but it was everything I could do. An indulgence, maybe, but I did it with my hands, and it took all the strength I had on some days, some nights, when the firefights came close, and I thought I would or should die, but nonetheless, I kept the lamp on above the paper as I tried to make a better world with my pen. This is a piece that's called Political Art. Pretty straightforward title, which is interesting because that was not its original title. I don't remember its original title, but I sent it off to an anthology of poems that were specifically connected to, you sent them a poem and you also sent them your notes on the process of writing it. And I opened that little essay with the words political art in quotation marks. And my feelings about political art, even though I write an awful lot of it, are very much contained in this piece. And they assumed that what was in quotes was the title of the poem. I do not remember what the title of the poem is anymore. So I simply call this political art. Political art. A print of Guernica hangs on the foyer wall above the drink table. Here are the famous horse and the upraised human face, and they're screaming as the hors d'oeuvres are passed. And on the facing wall, behind the buffet, hang 2 photographs carefully chosen for tonight. In this one is a girl we've seen before running and burning on a road in Vietnam years and years ago. Back then she was trying to fly to safety on the innocent strength rising along her fiery arms. And in this one is a man we've also seen before. And despite his death in 1890, he also keeps trying to rise, but he's frozen, awkward and insolent in his attempt to rise from the snow at Wounded Knee. And we're making small talk tonight, clicking our tongues at all these pictures, making crestfallen small talk because we know we should. Handing over money to save Afghani statues from the guns of rapists, handing over fistfuls of green guilt for the anesthetic of aesthetics. Buying permission to posture unflinching before those who have fallen, permission to shelter in these picturesque memorials in the hope of receiving from them some kind of prophylactic grace. And as we stare at the burning girl, as we sadly regret Wounded Knee and genocide, as we admire the abstraction of that burning Spanish town, we will click our tongues while marking the skill of the artist at having those faces seem so stark in their angled black and white, seem so shot through and through with an undertone of subconscious red. It's from this we've learned how to watch the news. The news that gives us each day our daily dread. A new crop of victims to be cropped and photoshopped, and we know just what to do when we see those faces. We observe, we regret, we remark, and we move on. Well, tonight there's a gallery fundraiser. Tomorrow night there will be another gallery fundraiser. We'll see the burning girl and the rising corpse again, and we'll make another print of Guernica. Why do we need all these prints of Guernica? Someday we'll see that if we'd been changed by all this art, at the first hint of genocide, we would smash our cameras, hang our paintbrushes back on the wall, stick our checkbooks back in our pockets, lift the paintings from their frames, and carry them through the streets to the places of power, calling out, why? Why? If the people inside our work could speak, they would tell us that if witness alone could change the world, this world would be changed by now. And we would have no need to learn that this picture of that girl is not beautiful. Just 2 more? 3 more? 9 more? I don't know. 2 more. Okay. So I've been doing this a long time. I published my first poem when I was 9, Highlights magazine, for those of you who are children's literature fans. No, I don't remember it. No, I've never been able to find the issue. You know, I've written poems, read poems, pushed poems out there. I've read all over the United States. I have slammed, competed with my poetry literally all over the United States, from Seattle, New York to here, down south, you name it, I've done it. Toured. I was on a tour that traveled the country, delivering poems in various venues. And all that I've done and published and put out there, never really resonated with the one group of people I would have liked it to resonate with, which is my family. My mom thought I should have been a doctor. My dad thought I should have been a teacher. Since I'm a trainer, I guess I get close there. And my sister thinks I'm still wasting my time. So there's not a lot of work in my repertoire about my parents, about my sister. But my dad passed away last year after a 10-year struggle with Parkinson's disease. And it was awful at the end. I was with him on his last day. He died overnight. Did I know? I knew it was close. I didn't think it was going to be the day after I saw him. He was in hospice care. And a couple of really strange poems. I have not written a ton since then about them, about him. My mom is 95, she has dementia. Anyway, I haven't written a lot about them, but this sort of popped out of nowhere, right after my father died. And so I'd like to, I don't perform this often. I'd like to give it to you tonight. I will warn you, it's a strange one. Unlike all the other things I've read. It's called Nursing Home Dog Walker. I hate bingo. I like cribbage. Random enough talk from an old woman. A physical therapist is walking up and down the rehab center's hall. I like cribbage too, said the therapist. That's a good game. Maybe we could play sometime, and then it trails off as they get away from me. I pull out the notebook. I write it all down. I'm like that. When it comes to people, I'm a metaphysical dog walker. You see me talking, hear something coming out of my mouth. Sounds like something I made up or felt or chose, but truth be told, and this one's true, I promise, I don't have very many original thoughts. No one does, really. At least I admit it. Everything I say has a leash on it. And secretly, I know I borrowed it from someone, as if they knew they wanted me to take it out for a stroll, or would have been glad to know I'd thought enough of their utterances to let them loose on the larger world, dignified them with craft, doing all this hard work of listening and then trotting out the words of others like eager puppies, as if this work I've been made to do paid me instead of others, as if I just like words as much of the rest of the world likes dogs, and walking them is its own goal. Meanwhile, the bingo game's getting underway in the common room. Patients are being wheeled in with their markers and oxygen and cards. B14, G5. Nothing here needs me. And neither does my father. Resting in his room down the hall, away from the yapping and the physical therapy that he no longer needs. Neither does my mother in her room across the way, disdaining all the socializing, impatiently insisting she could go home tomorrow if we let her. That dog won't hunt, as the old-timers say. It's not something worth discussing. And I've got other dogs I can't wait to walk, if only to get me out of here. My mom came home and is still home about a week after that, and my dad passed about a month after that. So. Okay. Final poem. There's a reason I'm saying this. I do have a handful of ancient chapbooks with me, which I am just basically giving away. I haven't sold or used these in a long time. And people ask, do you have a book out? Well, I grew up as a punk. We did our own books. We did our own chapbooks. It was all DIY, DIY, DIY. We published our own magazines. We created our own books and sold them at our own readings. It was an underground type of thing. And as a result, I kind of disdained an awful lot of the traditional publishing, he said, in a room surrounded by books. With a mother who was a librarian, you know, and my house is full of books. But I kind of stubbornly held to it for a long, long time. I'm 63 now, and I don't know that I did the right thing. There's a manuscript together. It's been rejected once already, so I get the first one out of the way. I'll start doing more. But I bring that up for a reason, and it's because of this last poem. For years, I played in a band, and the band used to play over at Starlight regularly, the Duende Project. This was one of the very first poems that I ever created a guitar line for, and the whole band did with me. Band's broken up, no more. Everybody's scattered. Thanks, COVID. And I'm kind of left alone, doing it myself again. And so there are two things I learned from being a punk. One is a poem called Punk, which I'm not doing tonight because this is a library and it's very loud. But the first one was this, that you do not need the validation of an artistic establishment to be creative. The second one makes up the title of this poem and the tattoo I have right here on my chest. This is DIY. She burns sage at the root of her favorite tree and calls herself priest. While in town they call her slut. And worse, because she dares to love who and what and where she wants. On the nights of the full moon, the men and the women of that small town come out and they circle her stucco walls. There's something in there that they need. And over there, in front of the white church, on the green, green lawn, right under the nose of the fat pastor, she dances without bending a blade of grass. God finds her agreeable. And over there, in front of the frat house, two men kiss. And the dangerous, drunken boys see it and decide to do nothing this time. That's a start. Two have begun to feel comfortable making public their own sacrament of the infinite. And my grandmother sniffs. Elderly is such a spindly word. The legs of that word do not begin to support me. She traded in her electric typewriter for a laptop 2 years ago and writes the definitive poetry of our times between the innings of Cubs games. And she won't stop smoking. Ever. Swears that if she gets to heaven to find that the clouds are posted, she'll find another place to light up. Friends, beloved friends, the arms of God are nearly endless, but there you hang out at the end of one of them like a finger on a vast hand, and all that's asked of you is that you take what you feel and bring it back to the heart. So, make a living. Make a life. Make love. Make art. Adorn this world with the work of your soul. But do it yourself. No one can do it for you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll take questions. If people have questions. Yep.
The guy who, what did you say his name was? The guy who did the nuclear sculptures.
James Accord. Yeah.
Did you ever find out why he committed suicide?
Probably because he made nuclear sculptures.
guess.
I have, no, I don't, I actually don't. I actually don't. I've looked him up. I'm not sure I've ever seen any speculation about it, just that he did commit suicide. I don't know if he was sick. I don't know if he was in despair. I have no idea.
Did they ever manage to leak any of his art or anything?
Oh, there are pictures available of it. You can see it, but you can't see it. Sculpture, you know, you can't walk around
Go
it.
in and visit, yeah.
Yeah, you can't go in and visit. It is literally still deadly radioactive. He wore a suit to make it. But he was the last person to get an individual license number. After that, they banned it and they restricted it to agencies. So he was the last individual to ever get the number. And he had it tattooed on the back of his neck. Meant that much to him.
Definitely gonna have to look that up now.
Yeah, I'm blown away. That's an incredible story.
Yeah, true story. What else?
Your turn.
Yeah, I'm so like, because there's so much to think about right
You've
now.
heard half these things before, Sarah.
Yeah. I think those were new for me, though. I think those were a lot of.
God, some of that's the oldest stuff I have, for God's sake.
Have to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
You know, the truth is, since you are used to seeing me at open mics where I tend to test new material,
Yeah.
it doesn't surprise me greatly.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I think you mostly would read stuff that was
Yeah.
new art.
But a lot of these were Duende Project pieces, too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm
So they're done. You're used to hearing them with, you know, a screaming, bloody drum track and
Or
the
the
world's greatest
weasel,
bassist. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, what is it, that weasel? He's a weasel because he.
Oh,
I probably won't.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not going to quote that.
No, don't quote that one.
I remember that.
Don't quote that. I'm trying to remember the name of that one.
Has your family ever come, anyone in your family ever come to see you read?
Reed, my sister has, many years ago, but like,
Yeah.
not really.
Yeah, I mean, I can very much relate
Yeah.
to that, too, of my own family not understanding. I was able to reach my dad before he died, though. I read a few things
Yeah.
to him that I wrote for him. And he was like, oh, I get it now.
What was fascinating was whenever I was like published in a magazine or something, you go over the house and the magazines are still on the coffee table. So, but yeah, I still should have been a doctor.
Were you in Vietnam?
Was I in Vietnam?
You're not.
I'm 63, not 83, Sarah. Yeah.
You're not old enough at all.
My
Timing is.
my war, if it had been a war, probably would have been like the first Gulf War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's me. My history is
Yeah.
just jumbled.
I was 13
Yeah.
when the Vietnam War ended, and then 15 when the final troops were pulled and the POWs were coming home. It very much affected me because I grew up staring at it on the screen every night. But
I thought it was a neat compilation of different things from like different chapters of your life.
it's essentially straight autobiography.
Yeah,
It pretty
that
much.
was a really cool. That
Yeah.
was a really, really cool.
And I left. I left the whole indigenous native piece. My father was indigenous, Mescalero Apache, residential schooled. My mother is Italian, which is indigenous to Providence. Not really, but Federal Hill though.
Yeah.
Federal Hill.
Being that you and your sister don't see eye to eye on your career paths, are you guys still close?
We're not close. We're fine. She's the major. No, I don't know how to put that. We've never been tight in that sense. She's 2 years younger than me. We just are very different people. She is the live-in caretaker for my mom right now. So we see each other constantly, but it's always about, did you remember to buy eggplant, as opposed to, you know, let's talk about our childhoods. Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. That poem you did about the news is the exact reason I don't watch the news. It's different.
Oh, I'm a news junkie. I still watch. I just recognize that there are limits to what art can do if it is not connected to action. And there are a lot of poets, especially in the slam scene, who for years were, you know, we're political poets, but would you ever actually see them doing anything of activist thing or something like that? Some yes, some no. The art's not enough, is my point of view.
Hypocrisy and everything.
Yeah.
Always going to be people.
Sure.
You know, screaming and shouting but won't do anything.
Sure.
So I get it.
What inspired you to start writing? I know you said you were 9.
I was 9. I wrote, I can tell you it was about the seasons in different parts of the country, which I knew nothing about, but I could write about it. And it rhymed. I think it was just, I can tell you what made me write, what made me write the first poem, I have no idea. It might have been a school assignment. I honestly don't know. I don't know if my mother sent it into the magazine or whether the teacher sent it into the magazine. I have no idea. I don't remember. What I do remember was that seeing it in print, I was like, oh, I'm trying to do another one. And that was the incentive to get me going. And then when I got to be about 13, 14, it was like, oh, there's something more here than just having fun writing poems. There's a piece of me that's going on. So I literally still have every single poem I ever wrote from the age of 14, collected in books, collected in computer files, collected in a blog on the internet. I have probably 8,000 or 9,000 poems.
You've been busy.
Very prolific.
I write every morning between 5 and about 8. One of the reasons,
The Highlights magazine you
No.
were publishing?
never could find it.
Oh, man.
Never could find it. It's all right. It's fine. I'd probably look at the poem and go, oh God, and throw it away. So
You might hate me for this question. Would you do it all over again and come to poetry?
I wouldn't have any choice.
With the same, yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't have any choice. This is not a hobby.
No.
I don't know what else. I think it was Mikhail Baryshnikov who once said on an interview program that there are 3 ways of sort of being an artist. And there have, do, be. And he may be quoting somebody, but it's like, I have a guitar. I play the guitar. I'm a guitarist. It's 3 different orientations to the work. And it doesn't mean that you're not good at everything, but there's a difference here. And the reason I know this is he told that story based on the fact that he started dancing very late. He started dancing very late. You know, Russian kids interested in the ballet start at like 3, 4, 5. He started at 13. And the only reason he got into the school was they came to him and he auditioned and they said, you don't have the credentials from all of these various places as to what you've been doing. He says, why do you think you can be here? He goes, because I'm a dancer. And if you ever saw him, yeah, he was a dancer. Yeah. Have, do, be. Again, I don't know that that's him, but that's the first place I remember it. Yeah.
I think you're one of the few people I can relate to, like in the poetry scene too, where for me it's not a choice either. It's like a very integral part of who, you know.
I don't, and I have friends who are writers. They like write novels, essays, short stories, and poetry. And they're writers. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'm not that.
Neither am I.
I'm very much a poet.
Yeah, I don't do the easy, and I mean, it's great that it's cool, but that's just not me. And I think your poetry is so powerful, it doesn't need anything. And I'm grateful you do what you do, too, because it gives me daily inspiration, and you've been like a mentor to me and someone I've looked up to for years.
Thank you, Sarah.
Cool for me to see you here tonight. And I wish there were, you know, all these chairs should be filled.
Well, they are. It's just, you know, we're there.
Yeah.
Always look on the bright side, as Monty Python would say.
Such a good movie.
What is your favorite poem?
Would you like me to do it for you?
Is it the loud one?
Is it the what?
The loud one?
No. I mean, that's good. And I'll do it for you if you want. But that's not my favorite poem, because my favorite poem is not by me. This is my favorite, and I tell people this and they think I'm joking, and I'm not joking. This is my favorite poem, and I'll explain why afterwards. You may have heard it. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. O mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jub-jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the Manx gnome foe he sought. And rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought, and as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker snack, he left it dead. And with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous day. Calloo, Calais. He chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. Oh, mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe. Lewis Carroll, of course, yeah. So why is that my favorite poem? People think I'm joking. I'm not joking. It's my favorite poem because, quite simply, I know of very few other poems where the total meaning of the poem is carried in the sound of the poem. Every person I know who hears that poem knows the picture in their head of what's going on. Your picture's different than mine, your picture's different than mine, your picture's different than mine. But when it comes right down to it, that poem carries its meaning totally in its sound. And what is a poem if it's not that? What is a poem if the sound and the meaning do not connect in an integral way so strongly that you can't separate one from the other? To prove my point, there is a book, probably somewhere in this library, called Gödel, Escher, Bach. It is a book about mathematical equations, their relationship to music, and there is a section of one of the chapters of that book that talks about that poem and presents, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it's French and Portuguese versions of it. And they don't use the same words that the English one made up. They use words that mean the same thing, but in French and Portuguese. Wrap that around your head for a little while. So Jabberwocky's my favorite poem. Of the ones I've written, Radioactive Artist is probably right up there. Punk is up there. I'm not doing it. It's dirty anyway. Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I don't think anybody will
All right.
here to be offended.
Okay. Yeah, but that's public access back there. We can cut it out. We can fix it in the
Give him
mix.
the peer pressure, man.
All right. Everybody over there, get ready. This is normally done. I've done this for years. I used to slam with it regularly. And some years ago, the band and I put it together with a full-scale hardcore punk backing. So, which was different than a lot of our other stuff, which is kind of a jazz funk fusion type stuff. Punk. Someone stripped the emperor, and the sneer became an honest part of speech. And someone who never twisted a knob before, twisted a knob. And someone who never bent a string before, bent a string. And someone sent a cowboy's cords out to do a bulldozer's job, and someone let joy out on a rampage, and the devil became our hero, and we forgot the time. But we remembered how to bang things. We recalled the joy of bump, bam, boom! Whether it was drums or bodies, we were slamming in the radio, quaked daily, and the songs got shorter in the music industry. Couldn't get out the door to find the noise and milk it until it died. And someone stuck metal under their skin and made a memento of a bud. And somebody pointed out that there's no future. And if there's no future, then there's also only now. And if there's only now, then there's also no past to hold us back. And everything began to bounce very hard. And everything began to whip around itself. And someone made a magazine and sold it without benefit of bookstore. And someone wrote a poem with reverb, and it shook the colleges down. And someone started a religion whose Jesus died for somebody else's sins. And what it was freedom in the form of a rejection letter. And what it was is what it still is, because someone, somewhere, is still trying to find out how far the human soul can go on 3 chords tuned to exhaustion, wet sex in a van, the roar of the crowd, and most of all in the joy and triumph that rises inside you when you spit your rage into the face of death as you realize that it's you strip You stripped the emperor, you crumbled his vanity, and you did it all by yourself. And when you were done, the gods of the big beat looked down on you in one dirty, sweet voice and said, "Hey, you kids, that's too loud." And you screamed right back, "There's no such thing!"
There used to be more of that in libraries.
I had COVID back in October, November, and one of the things that happened as a result was I have a touch, really my only long COVID thing, fingers crossed, is I have a touch of what's called dystonia, which is damage to my vocal cords from coughing and stuff. You may notice this. Have you noticed my voice is deeper than it used to be?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
That's from COVID, and that's about all I can do. Punk is very hard to do now.
I thought it still sounded great. Yeah,
Thank
I've never heard anyone say thank you, COVID.
Probably never will again.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it took my voice down a lot. And since I'm a trainer for a living, that has become a bit of a career issue. Fortunately, I do 99% of my work over Zoom, so I can find artificial ways around it.
I think it still sounds like, I mean, until you said that, it wasn't really something that,
I can feel it, because I can feel it here,
yeah.
deeper in my chest. But it may not be super noticeable to people who don't hear me all the time. Missing it, my girlfriend knows it, and my family has noted it. But if you don't hear me all the time, you don't realize it. I don't really have anything else. If there's no other questions or comments, I thank you. I thank you, all of you out there. And you too. And you guys. And all the authors in the room.